Hello, everybody. Welcome to an episode of Deep Dive. My name is Locke, and I have a very special guest from the original System Shock 2 team. I'll let him introduce himself because he is a legend in the creative field, Mr. Nate Wells.
Hi, I'm Nate Wells, art director. At the time on System Shock 2, I was an artist doing a lot of different things on that title. Level building, a little character, a little concept, a little voice work.
Who'd you get to voice?
Oh, gosh. I think I was a couple characters.
Because Eric did say he would just randomly pull people and be like,
he
hey,
would
can you
randomly
just
pull
do
us.
this?
So there is one character, I believe, named Bayless that I
Okay.
think was my voice.
Nice. That's
So
your claim to
that's
fame.
one I know for sure. I think I did that. The thing is, it was a team so small you could literally just talk to everybody.
Yeah, which is
You know,
kind of
it was
nuts
like 14 of us
in this little room. But yeah,
in a little room.
Yeah, it's
In a
crazy.
rented room, yes. So sort of the context of how I got started on System Shock 2 was
Yeah.
I was working on Thief, the Dark Project
Yes.
at Looking Glass at the time. I was hired as an artist there. And I think I was probably 4 to 5 months into that. They had just passed alpha,
Mm-hmm.
and they only had like 3 artists on the whole game. So I joined that group, sitting next to Dan Thron, who did all the cutscenes.
Yeah.
And Mark LeBlanc was right behind
Yeah.
me. He was also working on Thief.
Yeah.
And then
Blasting Rage Against the Machine. Yeah.
Yes. And then Aaron Coughlin was to my right. And then that was it. That was the whole art pit, was 4 people in cubes. And so I started doing a bunch of different things. I was working on cutscenes, like, because Dan did these amazing 2D cutscenes for Thief. So I was doing like backing plates for those. And then I would jump over and I built like 2 levels of Thief, which got handed off to designers eventually. But, and then I would make some like objects that got placed around in Thief. So it was really all over. It was pretty amazing back then, like the level of generalism. Like the things I just mentioned, like constitute 8 different jobs now.
Right.
Like
now you would have
right?
a dozen people working on all that stuff, you know?
Exactly. And we just had to sort of swing around and do this, completely different disciplines we would have to do on any given day. And it's amazing now to still be in the industry, 30 years later, and see like the level of specialization and the degree to which everything has changed.
Yeah.
And so at the time we were in the same we were in the, like, Irrational was starting up. They rented a room at
Looking Glass. Yeah.
Right. And then one day I was in the break room and Ken came up to me and he's like, hey man, don't make a big deal out of this, but would you be interested in working on System Shock 2? And I'm like, I'm working on Thief and whatever. But it was wrapping up.
Mm-hmm.
And he approached me to work on it. And it caused a little bit of friction between like me and Ken and Paul.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they resolved it is I was still a Looking Glass employee when I worked on System Shock 2, just like Eric was.
Yeah.
And Dorian was.
Yeah.
So there were just a handful of people who were actually Irrational employees. The rest of us were sort of on loan, subcontracted by Irrational to work on System Shock 2. So yeah, I mean, so long ago, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I kind of wrapped up my stuff on Thief, and then literally moved like down the hall 5 doors, and then now I worked on System Shock 2.
Nice. Like what was your first reaction when Ken asked you to do that, or like when you like saw what they were working on?
Super excited. It was weird because it was like a little bit clandestine, so I was like, oh, okay. And then he showed me, like, they had done, using the Thief engine, they had done like a quick like prototype, which the game did not look at all like in the end. In fact, they had already been through a couple creative iterations. Like they had done an initial attempt where the aesthetic was like a Buck Rogers, like retro future.
Okay.
And they had done an entire interface that was like big sweeping, like Art Deco and gold and metals, like, very much like sort of Outer Worlds, but like, very retro futurism, like the futurism of the 50s and 40s. Um, Buck Rogers style. And they kind of moved on from that. And then they
Mhm.
went real gritty, like straight
Yeah.
up 90s sci-fi. And I feel like that was probably the demo I saw first.
Mhm.
And this was all because they didn't have the name yet,
Right,
right?
because the license, like, EA had not gotten the rights, or EA hadn't bid on it or
EA
yet.
was not on board
Yeah.
effectively. Like the whole thing was being developed. If I recall, Ken and Zimu and John would know all about more about the business
Mhm.
side of it. But it was clear to us that like the game would be called Shock, and that we'll see if we get the license. Like we'll see if we get the name. And
Yeah.
then I think early on, after I started, and like Mike Swederack got hired, and some other people, it was like, oh, we got it.
Nice.
We don't have to be a spiritual successor. We can be
Yeah.
an actual sequel.
Yeah. So
And that's what
yeah,
shit kind of got real, and the aesthetic changed, right?
right. How did you capture that sort of perfect blend of, you said 90s gritty sci-fi, but that, like,
Yeah.
it's sci-fi, but it's horror, but it's not like, it's not Geiger and Alien. It had its own unique vibe to it. How did you guys come up with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, in some ways, we we were kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like we had
Fair.
systems.
Yeah. Fair enough.
There is a very clear aesthetic there that now we effectively had a mandate to continue, right?
Yep.
Because I think we were going a lot of different places. Like I was thinking a lot in terms of like, let's do the Nostromo, right? Let's
Mhm.
do a dirty, believable, space.
Yeah.
And I think, Gareth, who was the art director, because I was just a line artist effectively and an environmental artist. And actually, Mike Swederack, the texture artist, they were getting really excited about sort of reimagining Citadel Station, or the aesthetic of that station. And it came from a place, actually, probably, if you asked Mike, probably more inspired by Star Trek than
Okay.
anything. And it speaks to a thing that I think, Ken saw developing, and it's a thing that we went through in BioShock and BioShock Infinite. And it is that if you're going to show a failed utopia,
Mhm.
you have to see how nice it was, right?
Right.
Or there's no sense of loss.
Right.
So you need, you know, beauty next to ugliness. You need like, I had a rule which is like, if you're going to show say a destroyed column,
Mhm.
right next to it needs to be the column whole,
Yeah.
right? So you get this clear narrative in one shot, mise en scène, before, after, how nice it was, how terrible it is now, in one screenshot, right? And so that became a driving force. So life on the von Braun had to be wonderful, right? Or it had
Yeah.
to, like you had to get this sense that people had a really nice life there. And it was utopian. And it was a lot like being on the Enterprise. It was very egalitarian. It was extremely utopian. There was no money, there was no discrimination, there was no, personal conflicts, right? And then that's the backdrop, and that's just sort of the world you're walking around in. And then immediately, right, you start hearing logs and you realize, oh, these were real people, and things were brewing under the surface of this perfect utopia. Because that's the other thing, right? That defines any game with the word shock in it, which is that utopias fail because people are people, and right, and the human story you tell is utopias fail because people just inevitably revert back to themselves. They, are back to, being human beings, which is they get selfish, they get jealous, they're greedy, they could be petty.
Yeah.
So that, the high-minded ideals that originally defined the utopia ultimately undermine it. And that's the interesting story, right? And that's how you get pulled into the stories of these individual characters on the ship. So I think the ship design, even though it kind of went back and forth different ways in the beginning, I think there was one day where Michael Swiderick did a set of textures for medical. right? Because
Mhm.
that was the sort of the one we wanted to get over the hump on.
Mhm.
It's where you start in System Shock. It's where you were going to start in System Shock 2. And we wanted that moment for, fans of the series to be, resonant.
Yep.
And so it was very much inspired by the color palette. But everything was now, of course, graphically we'd come so far. We could do these much more interesting representations of, and that's where it became like plastic composite panels, and the consistent microgram of font, and like very sleek and rounded corners and things like that. And, no visible pipes and sharp,
Mhm.
sticky things. Like this was very much like a high-end living room more than it was like any other spaceship you've seen, like a
Yeah,
true functional.
utility basement or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. We took steps to hide the utility. So that actually when there's another point to that, which is that a lot of times it involves like going through tunnels or going behind the scenes. And that's where you can play with that contrast. You're like, I'm in a vent now. And now like all the fans are really close and it
Yeah.
is dangerous. And then I reemerge and like, oh, it's somebody's bedroom, with a little lamp and a desk. Like, so I think a lot of those things. There's a bunch of levels where it's really great to have these sort of unblemished backbone still visible, to have the
Yeah.
utopia still very much visible.
What was it like working in that era of gaming when 3D art was just getting started? It was relatively new territory.
Yeah. I mean, well, the one thing was, the technical constraints.
Hmm.
And I gotta say, I sometimes miss those
Yeah,
constraints.
because
Like,
now
because
your box you're playing in is so
yeah,
large.
and yeah, I work on Fortnite now, and we don't talk about Polygon accounts
No.
anymore. Like, it's been years, actually. Like, I want to say, like, maybe Bioshock was really the last time we talked about Polygon counts
Right. What,
in a
because you've been
serious way, in like a limiting way.
yeah, because
Like,
was that shipping on a 360? Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was shipping on
Yeah.
360, so there were still realistic limits. I think it was something like 2,500 to 3,000 for a
Hmm.
character for like a Big Daddy or
Hmm.
whatever. Um, Still very few polys when you compare
When
it
you think
to
about it, yeah.
today, right? But in the time of System Shock, you're talking 250
Yeah.
triangles for a character, right? And and then on top of it, we were using this BSP like subtraction engine, right? Where every view had to be considered. The engine was optimized for doing, like underworld things, right? Like
Yeah.
long tunnel, 90-degree turns. There's never much more than a hallway visible at a time. So, you know, even on Thief, we ran into this where like we'd want to do these grand halls with multiple walkway levels. And immediately that's when you start hitting all these technical limitations. So you have to be super smart about how you lay things out. And if you have a big scene coming up, you have to make the hallway turn in an S so that when you come out, it's dumped everything behind. It's had enough time to dump everything behind
Right.
you. And I think I seem to remember like a performance thing where it's like you could never have like more than 150 scene triangles at a
Right.
time. So 150 triangles in the world. So you're driven to make things 90 degrees. Like anytime you had to do something organic, it was super painful. Um, but like the characters were the real limitation, right?
Yeah.
Was that you would go in and be like you would go in there and scrape for like 2 or 3 extra polygons
Yeah.
to get out of them. And a lot of the characters were based whole or in part and just reskins of Thief characters. So a lot of the splicers,
Right.
um, we pulled those meshes because they had been like optimized down to the last triangle. And I remember one of the first things I did was like, yeah, like remaking a texture that mapped to the exact layout of a thief character, so that we would at least get those crew members sort of for free. I think the first character I built, that I did the concept for and built,
Hmm.
was the maintenance droid
Oh, nice.
with the one eye,
Yeah.
who ended up being like the Big Daddy ended up being an evolution of
Of
that,
that. It's like that on steroids.
right? Where the shoulders are
Yeah.
actually at the level of the eye. and it leads to this kind of like dumpy, kind of sad look.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a look that got carried into the design of the big
Interesting.
daddies, for
Interesting.
sure.
Yeah, very, very
Um,
top heavy, right? Like that weight is pushed up.
yeah. There's no neck, right?
Yeah.
Like the head is in the middle of the chest in
Yeah.
some ways,
Very cool.
um, as it was on that guy. And I remember, like, so I did the concept for that guy, and then I had to model it. And as you're drawing the concept, you're thinking in terms like if you look, most of his body parts are boxes
Mhm.
because I knew I would end up having to make those boxes anyway. Why not embrace it? Like
Totally.
you can do a concept that's like full of curves and complexity and like tiny thin antennas, but why? They're all going to get edited out. So I would think in terms of like, what's a cool robot I could build up that's mostly boxes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and you would always get better results if you did that, right? If you embraced your design limitations on that stuff, you'd end up with a better model because you'd get a better unwrap, which meant more texture space, and then you're leveraging like symmetry, right? So the right arm is going to be identical to left arm, right and left leg. That means you only have to show them once in the texture, and all you get is 256, right?
Yeah.
So you want on every pixel you can to work really well. And so yeah, that was probably one of the first characters I did. And then rigging those characters was like there was no rigging back then. So what you did was you worked on a Silicon Graphics workstation, and you would actually put you have the character like this, and you put these planes in.
Yeah.
And
Into like
between
the
those,
T-pose?
what?
Was it
Actually,
a
it wasn't a
T-pose?
T-pose. Well, it was like a relaxed
Okay.
T-pose.
Relax.
And you
Yeah.
would have to put in plane here and plane here. And that would say elbow. Everything between these two planes, that's elbow.
Oh, interesting.
Put another plane and another plane. And all these verts are shoulder. And then you had to put blocking ones so that it didn't run those planes down into the hip and include those in the shoulder. So you put these horizontal planes that are like stop.
Right.
And it was an absolute art unto itself.
That's
Mark
crazy.
Lazat did a lot of that. We would sit there and just tune those, and then when you export them, it would take like 3 or 4 hours before you before you knew if you did it right or not.
Dude, that's
You have
crazy.
to test it, and you'd be like, "Oh, I missed a vert. I got to slide that plane over ever so slightly, so that vert gets included in the shoulder." But yeah, there was all kinds of technical.
That's crazy, man. Like I was working on this project, and I'm just like, all right, convert everything to nanite. Let's go. And just
exactly.
I don't even think about that stuff anymore. Like it's crazy. It's just like
you don't.
I get frustrated when something is not nanite triangled, and I look, and then I have to go, oh, okay. Anyways.
Yeah, it's a lost art, and in some ways it's probably for the best that it went away, but I miss in some ways having those constraints to be like,
for sure.
There's this like Apollo 11 component to it all, which is like you have this to work with. You have a limited number of, limited size texture, limited number of polys, limited number of joints in the skeleton. Make something cool with that.
Yeah.
Where now it's very much unlimited. You will hit performance limits, but they are at the extreme end of what you're trying to do.
Big time.
You're like taking out one of 12 facial muscles, right, to economize.
Right.
It's a completely different world. But like, I think a lot of the satisfaction we got back then, at least I know I did, was like, not just that you did something cool, but that you did it cool and it was performant. Like it was screaming fast, whether it was a particle effect or, a weapon mesh or whatever. People be like, that looks really good. And you'd be like, yup, 125 polys, right? like that was easily as much of the satisfaction because it required a lot of ingenuity, a lot of creative engineering, and really understanding the technology, right? Like now you get so many polys, like I think a lot of artists don't really know how to optimize or what that would mean. Certainly not going in and hand collapsing individual polygons to save. And what that did more than anything, I think, is it made us all very educated in sort of the science and technology of 3D rendering. which I carry with me now. I still know why a thing is expensive or not expensive. Um, and because that's just stuff you had to learn back then. You
Right.
know, it's probably like the early days of automobiles where you had to like do your own maintenance. Like there, there wasn't necessarily an infrastructure or some technological support for you to be able to just be like, I get in my car, I turn the key, when it breaks, somebody else deals with it,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
You
Plug
know?
it into the computer and let it diagnose.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
amazing.
so yeah, I mean that's in some ways what I miss the most about
Oh
those
man.
days, like the victory of doing something like really efficiently as
Yeah.
well as visually cool.
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Do you have any like favorite memories, or like what's your proudest moment from working on Shock?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I'm really pulling back in the gray matter now.
Well, I mean there was one it's a funny moment. I don't know if it's
Amazing.
proudest moment, but when we were working on the many, somebody might have brought this story up or not. When we were working on the many, if you remember, it has like this very biological
Hmm.
like vibe to it, and like it's really like this fleshy mass that has taken over the Rickenbacker. And one of the things was we did these things called sphincter doors, right?
Yep.
Right. That it was like it was like this sphincter that opens
Just
up.
opens up. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we were doing the texture for that, I was making the doors and like doing the concept, and I can't remember. I think I was like searching through a bunch of like sort of gross biological like endoscopy like sort of stuff, and Josh Randall approached me and said he had a video of his
I
colonoscopy.
was just gonna say, do you want, like my colonoscopy photos?
So he gave me his colonoscopy video or some stills from his colonoscopy video, and I ended up like taking a frozen frame from somewhere in his large intestine and then bringing that into Photoshop and flattening it out and
Yeah.
using that as the base texture for those sphincter doors. So there was a
Amazing.
lot of alteration to it, but if you look at those doors, you're seeing like Josh Randall's colon,
Right.
audio genius Josh Randall's colon.
It's the best reference is real life, you know?
Absolutely.
That's amazing. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're coming to this, you know, you worked on that, yeah, 30 years ago ish.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, you know, the Shock series enduring influence on game art direction, like whether it's, you know, the visuals or the sound or everything coming together, like it's had an impact, and you know, you don't get a lot of games without, you know, without Shock.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of innovations that have happened in games that a lot of the developers will say came directly from the Shock series,
Hmm.
whether it was, I think probably the most significant is audio logs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for
The,
sure.
and that's something that we borrowed from System Shock 1, but audio logs became a fundamental way to tell stories in video games. I think in a way that before System Shock, they just weren't.
Hmm.
Part of it was that we could actually deliver full quality audio
Yeah.
at that time. I wouldn't say it's for the first time, but it was getting to the point where like you could optimize those audio files so that they're performant and get good quality. And it really was a different way, because you have, when you have that epistemic, like, you're reading letters, like, you're hearing things in the words of the individual was so much more powerful than a cutscene or a narrator or anything like that. And I think a bunch of things, and we gotta give it up to Doug Church for that. I think
For
he's
sure.
the one
Yeah.
who saw the potential of that. Um, and then we just carried it forward from there. But I think that's probably one of the things. I think just RPG elements being a big part of a shooter.
Hmm.
Um, And you could even argue that like it allowed the fantasy first person shooter because like fantasy games had all the numbers,
Yep.
but none of the sort of visceral first person experience until you get to like a Morrowind, where
Right.
you're like, hey, maybe we can do fantasy where you're not like third person.
Yeah. You're not just crunching D&D tables, right?
Yeah, you're not just crunching tables or moving pieces on a board. Maybe
Yeah.
we could do it. If System Shock can do it, then like maybe we can do it too, and have, you know, all the min-maxing numbers under the hood, but also like this visceral experience, this visceral first-person experience at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, I think it projects out in a lot of directions. I mean, that and the door code.
Of course. Well, I was gonna say, did you sneak any? Well, you said that the Big Daddy evolved from a scrap design. Is there anything in your other games that you snuck in from something on the cutting room floor?
I'm trying to think if I think we did end up putting the Macarena somewhere in Bioshock.
Okay, nice.
Remember that Easter egg from System Shock 2?
Yeah,
Do you remember that? So there's a place, I forget, it's in training. I forget exactly how you repeat it, but it's at the UNN Center, training center.
at the start of the game.
Yes.
Okay.
Third trip through.
Yeah.
And I think it's your third trip through with any branch. Before you go through the final door, if you look to the left,
Okay.
you'll see the it was our protocol droid. I forget what the droid was called, the skinny one.
Yeah.
He's doing the Macarena.
Okay.
And it was just like, which is like such a statement of the times of the year.
Absolutely.
He was made.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one Easter egg.
Nice.
That was in there.
I gotta go check that now. If it's in the remaster, I would assume it is, but
your final training, you're just about to go through the final door that teleports you to the start of the game. Look to the left through the window. There's like an office space in there, and this like science robot should be doing the Macarena.
That's funny.
There's other little things too, like the basketball game thing that we put in there, which was Thief, and I think dated back even to System Shock as well. Also, just the fact that it's called the Ramsey UNN Center in Ramsey, New Jersey. That's where Ken was from.
Okay.
That's where Ken grew up. So
all right.
That was a nod to Ken's
Amazing.
hometown.
Yeah, I was just curious on your if you had any philosophy about creativity or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I get asked a lot by young artists who are either like new to the business or trying to get into the business, like ask me questions like, how did you get into it? And it's like, whatever. And
luck and chance.
My answer is like, the way I got in does not exist anymore.
No.
Right? Like, none of us were experts. We all came in from completely different disciplines. I was self-taught as a 3D artist. I was self-taught as an artist at all. And we kind of all fell backwards into it from like different corners of technology. And then, as the industry grew, we grew with it. But like, you can't reproduce that moment in time.
Right.
But what I would try to reproduce from that moment in time is not one person who worked on these video games went to school to make video games, right? Some went to art school, most didn't. Some went, some did go to MIT and study programming, but they didn't necessarily study game programming, right? So for the artist side of things, like almost all of us came from sort of other places. Like, I was pre-med, biochemistry and anthropology or my...
That's crazy. I was also pre-med biochem or no, genetics. Yeah. I did genetics. I had biochemistry.
I focused on genetics.
Yeah.
Mostly.
That's funny.
Working with brewer's yeast.
Mine was fruit flies.
That genome. I ended up using all that terminology by giving people a briefing when we did Bioshock on basically like how a plasmid works. Like I gave them that.
Yes.
I was like, we should call these plasmids because that's kind of how you introduce a particular strand into a particular genome. It's one way to do it. And so all the naming and stuff from Bioshock came from that.
I love that.
But yeah, like, which meant that, a lot of us studied English and literature and history, and for me, anthropology and archaeology. And we brought all that to bear, and we still bring it to bear. Like, it is not uncommon for, like, artists that I meet now getting into the industry who have thought about and been inspired by nothing but video games and anime.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, they are executing art at just the highest level. Like, they've been, they grew up in the shadow of ArtStation. They knew the quality they had to hit. They knew what was hot. They were able to follow all the best concept artists and sometimes take courses online from them and really refine their craft. But I think the thing that is still rare and is precious is the core ideas that underpin everything. And those can come, and I think are often most surprising and interesting, and they come from a place that is not science fiction, right? That is not fantasy, that is not anime. Because the best of all those genres pull from
everything
from
else.
other places, right? Like, Tolkien didn't have other fantasy to pull from, so he pulled from World War One, right? And like, I think that, like, having a broad, I guess the takeaway lesson is, like, broaden your horizons.
Yes.
Like, look up from your console, look up from your desk. And I know that sounds so old man to say, but, like, develop outside interests, besides just entertainment media, and specifically, like, fantasy, sci-fi, anime, like, because you see it all over, and nobody's, portfolio jumps out at you because it's literally of the same stuff.
Yep.
Over and over and over. You can see in their work what they consumed. And when you see really interesting work, it's because it seems to come from somewhere else. A sense of interest in history and interest in science, things like that. I've gone a long way.
No, I hear you, man.
Much, yeah,
read a book, throw a ball. Read a book, throw a ball, kids.
Yeah, touch grass, read a book, throw a ball, get tackled once in a while.
Get in a fight, getting at least one fight, Get
at least one fight. Learn how to dance. Play the piano.
Well, man, this has been great. I really appreciate this. It's been a lot of fun to chat with you and wax poetic a little bit and go down memory lane. Thank you again so much for your time.
Absolutely.